Okay, so one other thing, with the normal force, we said that the two main kind of criteria is that it has to be between a solid and a solid, and it's gonna work perpendicular to whatever the angle of the surface. So this is perpendicular, forming a right angle. So if the surface angle changes, then the normal force also changes. If we're on a hill, thank you, if we're on a hill, and then that's why it feels like it's pulling you downward. We can kind of simulate this, like if I'm standing here and I shift, right, I can only lean so far before I have to catch myself. Right now, my center of gravity is right through the middle, right? But if I lean to the side and I lean far enough, my center of gravity has shifted, and because it has shifted, then I have to catch myself and realign my center of gravity. Otherwise, the center of gravity is gonna pull me where my center of gravity is, right? Like it's gonna pull me, down off to the side, right? And so right now, as you're sitting here, do you feel like you're being pulled anywhere? No, don't do it. But if you would like start to hang off the side of your seat, you would feel the same kind of that offset pull that I feel as I am doing my lean, okay? The reason why is because typically as we're sitting here or standing here, gravity is pulling down, normal force is pushing up. Those are considered equal and balanced forces because they're equal strengths. As soon as I change my center of gravity, then the normal force isn't able to cancel out the pull of gravity, and gravity seems like it is winning. It's not that gravity's gotten cranked up, it just makes it feel like like gravity is stronger because normal force, like it is now, isn't being totally canceled out. Okay, so let's go to slide number 10 and these balance forces, which again, just kind of demonstrated right now, gravity and normal force pushing up on all of us are totally balanced, right? We're not getting any change in our motion. All right, so slide number 10, if all forces are balanced by equal forces in opposite direction, then the object is going to maintain its current motion. This means both speed and direction. So here's the thing. Sometimes people think if forces are balanced, then there's no motion. And they showed this in the brain pop yesterday when they were in the airplane and they were moving, but they weren't accelerating. They weren't speeding up, they weren't slowing down because the forces acting on them, they were showing those with equal vector arrows. That is a balanced force if the arrows are equal and in opposite directions. What's happening is that you're getting no change, right? And that is the key. You can still have motion, but you can't have a change in that motion, right? And so our vector arrows, here you can see they're pointing towards each other. The arrows look like they're the same size. Same thing here, pushing equally in opposite directions. So it could be going like this, right? It could be going like this. You're not going to get a change. So this means that if an object is not moving, it's going to stay not moving, right? And this also means that if an object is moving, it's going to continue moving at the same speed and in the same direction. So this is like something on cruise control, okay? So if a car is on cruise control, it has a lot of forces acting on it, right? Those forces are in perfect balance if it's in cruise control. It's not speeding up, it's not slowing down, it's not changing direction, right? And so because of that, it is what we call experiencing balanced forces. And the hard part about this is that people always just say, oh, well, if they're balanced, then there's no motion. But that's not true. It just means no change in motion, okay? And that leads us to inertia. And so we just watched these videos, right? And so it's the tendency of an object to resist any change in its motion. So if it's at rest, it's going to stay at rest. And that's the easy one, right? Obviously, for my book to move, I have to apply a force. I have to push it. I have to pull it. It's not going to just do something on its own, right? It needs some kind of a contact force to make that movement happen. So if it's at rest, it's going to stay at rest. The one about the object in motion, staying in motion, you're like, nuh-uh. It's easy for that book to stop. It's easy for, if something falls, for it to stop when it hits the tabletop. Well, normal force stops it. right? The friction stops the book. That's like pretty common sense. Like we get that. But the ice example, here probably pretty soon, we're gonna be having some ice on our sidewalks and on our roads. And so anytime you think of ice, how easy is it to stop slipping if you're walking on a sidewalk and it's icy? Is it easy? Right? The problem is there's no friction or very little friction. So with little friction, you get that slipping and you're in motion. You can't just be like, whoo, I stop, right? That'd be nice, but that doesn't happen. Usually you stop because you fall, right? Unfortunately. So if you think about, if it's hard for you to think about an object staying in motion, always just think back to ice, okay? All right, so we're watching, there we go. So it also kind of talked about how the more mass an object has, the more inertia it has. So think about a semi and a little sports car. They're both traveling at 55 miles per hour down the road. A deer jumps out. Which one is going to be able to change its 55 mile per hour motion and have the best chance of avoid hitting the deer? What do you think, Nye?
Car.
Yeah, it has a lot smaller mass. Like, that's like a no-brainer. Everyone's like, well, duh, the car, right? Other way around this, they're both at rest. If I say I will give you $1 million if you can move one of these vehicles, if you can push it by hand, which one are you going to choose to at least try to move? Jonna? The car has a smaller mass, right? So you have more ability to overcome no motion with a small mass. You have more inertia, involved with trying to get that big mass to move.
Would the car be in park or in neutral?
Let's say they're both in neutral.
Okay. Yeah, I can
Flat
push the car.
surface in neutral.
I can push the car
Okay? So, I mean, you'd all want the better chance of winning my $1 million that I hypothetically have, right? So you would all pick that car. I know you would. And so again, the more mass, the more inertia. It's harder to stop the object. It's also harder to get the object moving. So we have to look at both sides of inertia, not just one. So why does this ladder go flying off? The truck stopped. Why didn't the ladder? Why? Yeah, it didn't get the stop. That car didn't stop the ladder. Now, if the ladder had been attached, strapped down, yeah, right?
Strap it down.
So what else in a vehicle kind of works like this to overcome inertia? What do we have in a car?
Brakes.
Seatbelts, right? They want us to be part of the car, right? And that way, if the car comes to a sudden stop, you don't behave like the ladder and go flying, right? You don't want to, obviously. Now, some people are like, well, I don't like wearing a seatbelt because if something happens, I want to be able to get out. I get it. Like, there's a million different situations that can happen. But the idea of the seatbelt, in most situations, it's better for you to remain with the vehicle than to be launched as a projectile like the ladder, okay? But the ladder never got the memo, right? It just kept on going, and then I heard somebody say gravity eventually acts on it, which is true, right? It doesn't just go forever, right? This ladder just flying down the road. Now, if it was in outer space, sure it would. But because we have gravity, that force would pull it down until it reaches a stable, solid surface, and then it would experience normal force to counter gravity's pull down, normal force would push up. Okay. All right. And so this is also known as Newton's first law of motion. And this is going to be also really helpful because next year we are going to have a whole unit on Newton's 3 laws. And so you're going to be like, oh yeah, I remember, we talked about this. So inertia is not going to go away, which is nice. Again, this unit, we have a lot of repeat next year. So what you're learning is not just wasted time, right? It's going to come back and we're going to use it again. All right. So there's always going to be something working against motion, right? And in this case, friction is going to be our number one force that is doing that, okay? So friction occurs when two objects move past each other. right? So they're in contact, there has to be a touch. Sometimes you don't feel like you see one of them because if you're going through air, you don't see the air, but you can see the effect, right? If you stick your hand out the window of a car that's moving, right, you can feel that air smack in your hand. And like if you turn it this way, right, when it's broadside, you can feel it. When you kind of snake through it, you're making your hand more aerodynamic and it kind of has less air resistance. So sometimes if it's going through a gas or air, it doesn't seem like, because you can't see the air, but you can still feel it. It's always going to work opposite the direction of the motion. So if motion is to the right, friction is going to be working against that and it'll be pushing left. So it's going to experience this resistance right here, which is why, you know, so many industries spend billions of dollars trying to make things more air resistant, right? What kind of industries do you think might try to reduce air resistance, wanting to make things be able to travel more freely?
Planes.
Absolutely, right? You don't want this plane to be like this big blocky thing that's just like trying to plow through the air. He wants to be streamlined. Good.
Space shuttle and cars.
Sure, for sure. Same kind of concept. What else? Yep. What about like NASCAR? What's the point of NASCAR?
Go fast.
Go fast, right? So if you only have so much power available with your engine to make the car go fast, the only other option you have to increase speed is to reduce that friction, right? If you can't increase the speed, the power to go any faster, your other option would be try to remove what's working against that motion, right? So air resistance. So try to go more air resistance, making things more aerodynamic. What about like the Olympic runners and swimmers? Think about their attire. Say it. Swimmers wear those bald caps, right? They don't want their hair to catch all that water. As that water goes through their hair, you wouldn't think. It's just a little bit, but they're winning by hundredths of a second, right, sometimes. So, you know, it comes down to like just little differences. So this is a little bit off topic, but years ago, we were at the World Show with the horses, and my husband is like, I'm going on a big diet. He lost like 20 pounds before he went out there. He took his saddles to this Amish guy, and like he cut a bunch of the extra leather and like a bunch of the extra stuff off of it. Like he was trying to like slim things down as much as possible. He ended up winning that year with a 2-run average. Like he made 2 runs and they took the average and that's the winner. He won a 2-run average by 3/1000ths of a second. So tell me that extra, like he ended up changing his, like the amount of mass on the horse by about 30 pounds between him and the saddles that he changed. So, I mean, just that little bit of a difference when you're trying to go that fast can, you know, I think that had to help, right? So you think of the Olympic runners and swimmers, besides the bald caps, what else do swimmers do to their body? Anybody know? They shave everything. Like my best friend in high school, she was a swimmer, and like they would have like shaving parties. They'd have their bathing suits on, but then like they were like shaving everything, boys, girls, everything. It's like, whew, yikes, that was intense. What else?
I found out how they could reduce all friction while racing.
Do it in
NASCAR.
space.
Or just do it in a vacuum, but have the engine encased in something that still have air in it, so you can still have the combustion powered engines, making them go faster.
You come up with that. You come up with that, and you'll have a whole new sport, Zach. I love it. I love it. Think about the track athletes for a second. What do they wear? Kind of clothes. Wearing like their big baggy sweats.
Shorts and t-shirt.
Kinda.
They're wearing like shorts that
above the knee.
I don't even think are classified as shorts.
Agreed. It's like they're
They're
running in
their
like
bodies.
skivvies.
Yes.
Basically like less than bathing suits almost. Right? They basically are having just like second skin covering up bare essentials. Bathing suit areas, right? That's it. the whole point, they don't want any drag. They don't want anything that can trap or collect any air as they're running, which let's granted, I mean, they're super fast, so they are, you know, causing like that wind current to go over their bodies. So again, they're trying to reduce that as much as possible, okay? So friction is gonna be working against all of this. All right, so we have a few specific types of friction. Drag. It is gonna work against, it's a friction, so it has the same, it's under that same definition, but it only moves through fluids, so like gases and liquids. So this can be with a boat, like Nye had brought up. This can be moving through air, okay? So anything that is moving through a gas or liquid is experiencing drag. I don't know, I remember, I always think in my head, like, it's a drag, man, right? It's dragging me down. It's force of friction. That's what it kind of does. It works against the motion. Now, if we're talking, sometimes friction is a good thing though, right? Think back to the ice. So not a type of drag friction, but if we're on ice, we want to increase friction. Am I right? Like, we want that traction. So certain situations, you know, traction or friction is a good thing. Most situations, though, we are kind of fighting against friction. That's why we use motor oil, right? The piston's pumping up and down in your motor. That's rubbing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It won't take very long for that to get hot. So you have to have that motor oil to kind of lubricate and get everything where it's able to move freely and easily. And so most of the time we're talking about it being a bad thing, but friction is not always bad. Like, sometimes we need it. So kind of keep that in mind as well. So friction and drag affect the motion of objects, obviously. It may even cause objects to slow down or come to a complete stop if there's enough friction involved. Right? So if friction is stronger than the force that's being applied, or the force that's being applied is removed. So like, this book will move as long as I'm applying the force to it and I keep my hand on it, touching it. If I just give it a tap though, it's not gonna go on forever, right? Friction will eventually pull that to a stop. Right? And so we've talked about these examples, right? Can you think of any other examples? Or if you want to write down any of the ones that we've talked about, you know, the book sliding on the table, right? Where would a ball roll longer? If you kick with the exact same amount of force, is it going to roll farther on blacktop or on grass? Right? Definitely the blacktop, right? There's less friction. The grass provides more friction. Okay, let's end today with a song, and we will come back to slide 16 in a minute, or next tomorrow.